Hey guys, in today's video, I want to talk about Jannik Sinner's serve technique. And if you watched the ATP finals, you know that Jannik is serving better than ever. He's serving more aces and he's truly one of the best servers in the world. His technique, however, is somewhat unorthodox. I already made a video during the Australian Open on Jannik Sinner's serve development. Some of the changes that Jannik has made on his serve, I'm going to link that video in a pinned comment. See, what's unorthodox about the Sinner serve is his rhythm. He has all the fundamentals just like any other top server. And this rhythm is somewhat similar to the Zverev rhythm. If you haven't seen my recent Zverev serve analysis, I highly recommend that you check it out. So Sinner, just like Zverev, unloads early. And let me show you how he ends up unloading early. So it all has to do with his serve rhythm. So generally, players with a pinpoint stance like Sinner will pull the back foot up as the racket is going towards the trophy position or the trophy face. So this movement will happen simultaneously. Now, some players, especially on the WTA, will pull the back foot in too late. So they'll take the racket up and then pull the back foot in. This is not optimal by any means. It makes a lot of sense to pull that back foot up as the racket is going towards the trophy phase, where in this process the player can begin to load so that once the trophy phase is reached, the body is fully loaded and can then be unloaded as the racket is dropping. Now Sinner does something that's unorthodox because he will lag the racket behind the toss arm. So he tosses the ball first, the racket is frozen in this position, but he doesn't wait with his back foot. As he's tossing the ball up, he pulls the back foot up to the front foot. So this is the movement on Sinner's serve. The racket is frozen in the lag, and as he's tossing the ball up, the back foot is moving up to the front foot. Once he releases the ball, it is then when that racket starts to go up. So Sinner has a very early loading position. Once he initiates the toss, he's already starting to bend his knees so that once that back foot pulls up to the front foot, he's already bent and his legs are loaded. He also already has a tilt in his shoulders because he has already released the ball. Now, when his racket begins to go up and reaches this area, Sinner begins to unload his legs. So this is very unorthodox because it is an early unload. He begins to go up with his legs prior to the racket reaching the trophy phase. This is an extremely difficult rhythm to replicate. Let me try. So, Sinner will shift the weight to the back foot. He will lag the racket behind and he will pull up the back foot as he's tossing the ball. Let me try it again. He will lag the racket behind, toss and pull at the same time. All right, let me try to actually hit the ball and try to unload my legs a little bit early. Okay, I'm nowhere near able to execute this rhythm. It is a very precise timing of this service action. Now, has Sinner always served like this? No. Is this something that he was taught? I don't know. My guess is that Sinner kind of figured this out on his own. It's something that he tried and it started working and he just kept doing the same thing. Very similar how Andy Roddick found his service motion. Again, I'm not 100% sure on that. This is my guess. But fact is, this is a very complex and complicated rhythm. Are there any advantages to this rhythm? Well, one advantage is that it's a very dynamic movement. So when you start unloading the legs early, you're not actually unloading the entire system quite yet. Because remember, the cartwheel is initiated when the racket starts to drop. You don't want to initiate the cartwheel too early because that's going to shallow out your racket drop. So Sinner, in essence, starts to straighten his legs prior to the racket drop. So he doesn't begin to cartwheel yet. And of course, the rotation is initiated much later when that racket whips around the body and starts going up and forward. That's when the torso rotation is initiated on flat and slice serves. So the difference between the Sinner serve and some other players is that Sinner has more of a segmented unloading, where the legs go first and then it's the cartwheel and then it's the torso rotation and the rest of the body straightening, even though Sinner doesn't load very aggressively on his serve. He does have an adequate coil where his elbow is slightly behind the body, but not as much as other players. In other words, his chest is more pointed towards the side fence and he doesn't bend backwards as much as some other players. So his loading position is not that aggressive. So again, as opposed to other players that unload everything in unison, in other words, they load their body perfectly, and when the racket begins to drop, everything gets unloaded simultaneously. In other words, the legs begin to straighten, that non-dominant side starts to go down, the dominant side starts to go up, the body begins to get straightened if players are bending backwards and forwards. You don't see much of that at Sinner. It's more of a segmented unloading where the legs go first and then it's the cartwheel and then it's the torso rotation. And he doesn't straighten his body that much because he doesn't bend backwards and forwards much when he's fully loaded. And as already said, Zverev has a very similar service motion as of late. So obviously there's nothing wrong with this type of serve, but is this something that you should experiment with? Well, I think you're going to have a very difficult time executing this timing. It's a very intricate timing, and as you probably know, there are so many moving parts on the serve. There are so many things going on at the same time. This is something that's very difficult, if not impossible, to time correctly. Also remember that this rhythm is quite quick and does require a lower toss, so you don't have a lot of time to execute all these actions, which adds to the degree of difficulties. So if you have a similar rhythm to Sinner and you're having success with it, by all means continue to execute your serve in that way. But my advice is that it's going to be a lot easier to unload the body simultaneously. You should lag the racket behind, and what you're going to do if you have a pinpoint stance, you're going to pull that back foot up to the front foot while the racket is going up towards the trophy phase, and this is where you're going to start loading your body. You're going to start bending backwards, forwards. You're going to start bending your knees, getting on your toes, and getting your elbow behind the body. So if you segment your serve in that particular way, once you reach that trophy phase, you can unload the entire system simultaneously. That's going to be much easier to execute than segmenting your unloading process like Sinner and Zverev do it.